Good morning, everybody. Europe has had lots of wars, and in the Middle Ages, one of the big ones was the 100 Years' War between the French and the British, and it was on this date in 1415, on October 25, that one of the great battles of that war happened, the Battle of Agincourt. The region in red is Aquitaine, and the 100 Years' War began partly because it was unclear who was running France because of Aquitaine. So Eleanor of Aquitaine on the left, French, married Henry II of England on the right. Their bodies are in an abbey in southern France. So who's going to rule France, the English or the French? So Charles IV was the French king. He died in 1328, and he did not have a male heir. So who was going to sit on the French throne? Well, he had a sister, Isabella, on the horse, who was married to Edward II of England. So her son was Edward III. And he thought he should be the king of France because his uncle had been king. So here he is, Edward III. And he's the English king that will begin the fighting against the French in what we know as the 100 Years' War. So Philip VI, King of France, pressed the French claim for Aquitaine, and this led Edward to go to war with the French. And a backstory had to do with the wool trade. Both England and France were very involved in the wool trade. It was very lucrative. So who was going to control that? So here's a map of the battles of the 100 Years' War. Our event is near the top at Agincourt, and right beneath it you see the Battle of Crécy, which will be the first one. So we all have an image of knights in shining armor, but the 100 Years' War will see the end of that kind of fighting. It was just too slow and too heavy, and the new weapon will be the English longbow. And English longbowmen were really good, and this will be decisive for England in the early days of the 100 Years' War. And the first use of artillery in Western Europe, many people think, happened in the early battles of the 100 Years' War. So a lot's going on here. So the first battle was the Battle at Crécy, 1346. You'll notice the English longbowmen on the right, the French mounted cavalry on the left. Big loss for the French. Another battle at Poitiers was the same, and it really devastated the French nobility and really put an end to that kind of mounted warfare. So Henry V is the king of our story. There had been kind of a pause in the fighting. He started it up again for lots of reasons. One is he claimed that France should be ruled by him. And our battle is the battle at Agincourt, October 25, 1415. It had some of the similar themes with longbowmen and the French having the crossbows and the mounted cavalry. But the English also used pointed stakes. They called them archer stakes to prevent horses from attacking, and it worked. So at the end of the battle, England controlled everything in green, and it's looking pretty good for the Brits. But then Henry died unexpectedly, and somebody showed up to help the French, and that would be Joan of Arc. And after Joan shows up, the tide begins to turn for the French, and eventually the French will win, and Joan will become the great heroine for the French people. So the first battle was at Crécy, and here's what it looks like today. It's just an open field. You can imagine these people walking or horseback riding there. And then our event, Agincourt, is simply a crossroads in France today, and you can see the marker in the front, which explains it. One legacy of the 100 Years' War is these British soldiers who captured French nobility and ransomed them, used those fortunes to build these big mansions in England. That was one way you made money as a soldier, is you captured somebody and ransomed them. But I think for a lot of us, the great legacy of the 100 Years' War and the Battle of Agincourt is the St. Crispin's Day speech, where Henry V, here's Ken Branagh playing him, talks about, "We happy few, we band of brothers, from the Battle of Agincourt.